Yes.
Now you have an impressive resume. I want others to understand what you stand for and what you're doing and how you're going to help the community.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career as a public defender in Orange and Osceola County 20 years ago. After serving as a public defender, I went out into private practice where I continued to represent individuals who were charged with criminal cases.
Nice.
I was recruited by my alma mater, University of Florida College of Law, go Gators,
Right.
to come back as a law professor. And there I became the founding director of the Criminal Justice Center and developed a robust training program for student lawyers and have produced some of the best criminal law practitioners across the state and some throughout the country.
Wow.
So I worked there for 17 years.
Wow.
And I left UF to come back to Orange County, Florida to work as an assistant state attorney. And I was the founding director of the Conviction Integrity Unit. And what that means is that I assembled a unit to investigate claims of wrongful conviction.
Okay.
Did you know that nearly 3,000 people have been exonerated across the country?
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
3,000?
nearly
There's more.
3,000 people, and there are likely more.
Hmm.
Many of those cases were DNA exonerations.
Okay.
So there are lots of people who may be wrongfully convicted but don't have DNA to prove their innocence, and those people unfortunately are still in prison.
Protesting is great and all, but not with the violence at all.
Cut the violence out, guys.
But the
That
thing
gets
is,
nothing.
in order to make the change, we have to change the system.
Right.
This is what you're here for.
Yeah, you know, that's so right, guys. Listen, it's unfortunate and it's tragic, right, that we are now discussing yet another murder of another black body. And we're rioting, which we should not be. We're protesting, which is great. But then what? Then what are we going to do to stop it from happening
Right.
again?
What's our plan?
What is the plan?
Right, what's the agenda, guys?
Because before George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor,
Yeah.
there was Michael Brown,
Yes.
there was Trayvon Martin.
Right.
Like, so what are we going to do to actually stop it from happening? And the answer to that is vote. We have to vote. Our vote matters. And so many times we sit out of our local elections. We get really involved in what's going on a national level,
Right.
but we sit out the local election.
Right.
And the local election is what impacts our daily lives. So how does that tune in? It all comes together because the local sheriff and the local state attorney are an integral part of what happened in the George Floyd case. Why? Because the elected sheriff makes a decision as to which sheriffs work in your community.
Okay.
So the law enforcement officer in the George Floyd case had a history of misconduct.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
This wasn't the first time that he had done this. If we had a progressive law enforcement officer, head law enforcement officer, elected law enforcement officer, whether it be sheriff or police chief, then that person would have been able to make the determination that this person cannot work in law enforcement anymore.
Right.
They have a history of brutality,
Yeah.
they have a history of misconduct, and they are no longer fit to work on the streets. A state attorney could have made the determination, based on other allegations of brutality, that this behavior should have been prosecuted. Had those things happen, George Floyd would still be alive today. This week I had my very first debate with two of my opponents in this race. And it was very interesting to me because they were calling themselves progressives, and they were doing it pretty convincingly.
Okay.
And what I need people to do is go and look at their records, because I am the only candidate for state attorney in this race who has not contributed to the problem of mass incarceration in this country. I am the only candidate in this race who has spent my entire 20-year career fighting for or against the injustice in the criminal legal system.
Wow.
So you have to not just listen to what comes out of people's mouths.
Right.
You have to look and see who they are, where they come from, and what they've done. My job, or my goal, once I get the job,
You will.
Yes.
will be to change the culture of prosecution, to give alternatives to incarceration. Many of the people that we have in our local prisons are there for nonviolent offenses. I don't believe that we need to send people to prison for nonviolent offenses. Prison should be reserved for people who are actually a danger to our community. If they're not a danger to community, then why are we putting them in a dangerous position? Prison is a violent place.
Wow.
Yes,
When you
it
send
is.
a non-violent person to prison, they're either going to be a victim or they're going to be an aggressor. Those are their only options. And they're going to return, if they return to society, they're going to return a violent person.
Right.
Right.
So how are we going to reduce recidivism and increase public safety when we're turning out violent individuals? We're producing violent individuals where there weren't violent individuals before.
Wow.
It only makes sense.
So I believe that we have to change the culture of prosecution. We have to use alternatives to incarceration. We have to partner with community organizations that are doing things to help people who are addicted get off of drugs, to help people with mental illness receive treatment, to treat children like children, because calling a child an adult for the purpose of prosecution does not make it true.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's it, guys. And Monique, you want to make a change. I'm so happy for you. I'm grateful
So,
for you.
hey, we appreciate
When
it.
is our next vote? When can we vote? When's the date? How do we
Next
vote?
election.
Because some don't even know how to go about
Yeah.
voting.
So the local election is August 18th. That's when you're going to vote for state attorney. That's when you're going to vote for sheriff. That's when you're going to vote for many of your other local candidates as well. The deadline to register for the August 18th election is July the 20th. You can request a vote by mail ballot if you don't want to go to the polls. That's okay. Florida typically has early voting, so you don't have to wait until the 18th to vote. You can cast your vote in advance. But please understand this. If you do not vote, your voice will not be heard. If you do not vote, change cannot take place. I implore you, vote. We must vote like our lives depend on it, because they do.
Absolutely. We'll make a
Yes.
change for our younger generation, guys, and we can do this. So we stick together, vote, look at through their backgrounds, our candidates, and we can make this change. And thank you so much for willing to be with us every time we call you.
Yeah.
You'll be at City Hall, God willing. Guys, vote. How can we find your webpage or any information?
So MoniqueForStateAttorney.com, on Facebook at Monique for State Attorney, on Instagram at Elect Monique State Attorney.
All right, guys, from
Yes.
Peace on the Streets.
Peace on the streets.
Don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Peace on the Streets Radio.
And make sure you get out and vote, you guys.
Ciao.
Peace.